Sierra Leone says no, no to human trafficking. Sierra Leone says no, no to human trafficking. Let us fight together so we can put an end to it. Let us fight together so we can put an end to it. Human trafficking in persons is a criminal offense.
Welcome back to the program this morning. I am Victor Jones here with you. Now, President Julius Maada has stated that the duty of his government is to tackle human trafficking head-on by mobilizing resources and collaborating to prevent and protect citizens, especially children, from this inhumane and criminal act. President Bill made this statement when officially launching the National Conference on Trafficking in Persons and the toll-free line of 134 at the Bintamali Conference Center in Freetown. Now, as you may be aware, human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor to commercial sex acts. According to reports, every year millions of men, women, and children are trafficked worldwide, including Sierra Leoneans. Well, for more this morning, I have with me in the studios Umaru Fofanah is the name, and he's a country coordinator, Sierra Leone African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery. Good morning and welcome, Umaru.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure having you on the program this morning.
Thank you.
Human trafficking, in your opinion, is it rife in Sierra Leone?
Yes, human trafficking is in Sierra Leone and it is in the increase.
In what forms or shape exactly does it occur?
Well, it happens in many forms. And maybe for the sake of this discussion, I would like to tailor it to both internal and external trafficking. And for internal trafficking, more or less, it happens within communities where relatives, for example, might leave urban communities, go to rural communities, seek maybe their friend or family to tell them that give me your child for me to take him or her to urban communities for more opportunities. And most times this happens within the sort of what we call men picking. And when these children are brought to Freetown, the purpose of moving them from their rural communities or their families to the cities is being diverted. That is more the reason why you see children on the streets, selling on the street and also maybe working with street beggars. And this, it is a problem because it hinders the good of our human capital development. And that is more the reason why the government of Sierra Leone sees it necessary to organize the first national stakeholder conference on trafficking in person on the theme strengthening national frameworks and stakeholder networks to end modern slavery.
So now, the human occupation is changing fast, and now people see emigration, for instance, as one of the ways, to arriving at greener pastures. Temple Run, as it is famously known, is one of the ways in which most Sierra Leoneans have ended up dead along the Mediterranean and other seas. Are you aware of this?
Very much so.
And how does this dovetail with what you're saying?
Yeah, it does. So, as I mentioned, we have the internal and the external. So that's the external trafficking. That's more or less like labor migration. And I think I would like to also commend the Ministry of Labor, because when this government came to power, you see that there was a hold on labor migration to some extent. And that is more the reason, one, to make sure that we have control measures in place so that agencies that are within the space are registered and also screened properly to make sure that the set purpose of moving or at least providing international job for our citizens do not go unutilized. And recently the ban was lifted, but then we now have a system where agencies adhere to the control measures led by the Ministry of Labor. So it is in the increase. And I want to say that labor migration itself is not a problem. The problem there is when the purpose of, moving them to other countries is being diverted. Say, for example, you're told that you can go to Kuwait and then work as a driver, but then when you get there, then it's something else. And and sometimes they don't even go through the Mediterranean Sea. They use passport because these are legal processes as well. They go through the airport and then go to their destination. But when they get there, and that was in the past, because now we have control measures that I think, if properly implemented, then it will remedy the situation. That is to make sure that Sierra Leoneans that go overseas are protected, are given the right call so that they could utilize their potential.
Your organization is Sierra Leone African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery. Take us through your work so far. How have you been, supporting what you're discussing this morning, ending human trafficking and slavery in general?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So APRIES is sits in the U.S. at the University of Georgia. It also has a Center for Human Trafficking Research and Outreach. It is a consortium of international researchers, policy advocates, and researchers from the University of Georgia and the University of Liverpool. So our aim, more or less, is to strengthen development partners, local agencies, to implement three P strategies. That is the protection, the prosecution, and the prevention. And for Sierra Leone, for example, our focus is on child trafficking. So we are working across 4 districts in Sierra Leone: Kailan, Kenema, Kono, and Cambia. So between the year in September to December 2020, we conducted a research across 3,070 households to examine, to understand the context of child trafficking and the dynamics. And we are able to also, so we did that both in qualitative and quantitative methodology approach. We engage policymakers, NGOs, and community stakeholders in our qualitative research. And in the quantitative research, we interviewed survivors, parents of survivors, to understand what it takes to be a trafficker, and also to see how our baseline reports will provide intervention model to the government of Sierra Leone and other stakeholders. And at the conference on Monday, the baseline report was launched by the Ministry of Social Welfare. And as I speak now, the report sits with the President's office and also other stakeholders to look at the recommendations in the report and then provide solutions so that we all can work together to end child trafficking or modern slavery in general.
What are some of these recommendations? Just list through some of them.
Yeah. So one of the recommendations is that, for example, educational system. We need to make sure that we, like, for example, we have the free quality education, which is a very good program, but then we need to see such programs expanding so that access to schooling is available to PPLs, of course, in the communities. And we have to see the need to also, because one thing that also came to mind is, for example, if you have a primary school in a particular district, but then there is no secondary school, when the child promotes or graduates to secondary school, the family is forced to send their children to urban communities to seek further education. And other areas that also needs to be looked at is to include survivors' voice in policy design so that their voice could be heard, because they know their problem, they understand their problem. If they are being involved in policy design or policy review, then I think we can have a policy that will speak for them, that will help to solve their problem. Because they feel left out, they feel not being heard, and they see that they have a role to play. So what we have to do as stakeholders is to create a platform that will help to incorporate survivor voice into our policies that we document, and also the implementation process. And our research also stated that children with single parents or no parent, in fact, are in a very vulnerable position being trafficked. So we need to look at how can we come with strategies in place to cater for such families, to provide, if it has to do with livelihood support, so that at least that can also help to elevate, or reduce the poverty constraint that they are faced with.
The Ministry of Labor, does send locals to these countries. They still do, for mean jobs like, laundering and housekeeping and stuff like that. And from what you've explained, your organization appears quite vividly in this picture that it more or less conducts academic researches, to say, and to help cushion the effects of, illegal migration. So, have you been working quite closely with the Ministry of Labour?
Yes, we work quite closely with the Ministry of Labour. In fact, I'm a member of the Task Force Secretariat.
Oh.
So, and the Ministry of Labour is also a member of the Task Force Secretariat. So what we discussed as a secretariat is what can we do, when the ban was lifted. And one of the things that was discussed is, one, to make sure we have pre-departure briefings, so that when people and I'll call it an opportunity, if not exploited, it is an opportunity. So when you have the opportunity to travel, we can conduct what we call, just to engage you, give you a pre-departure briefing to manage your expectation, and then you understand what are the pros and cons for you to travel and what should be in place. And also, we also engage the Ministry of Labour, and then we discussed about, protecting workers overseas to make sure that workers do not live with their employers. For example, when you talk about the house helps, one of the things that usually leads to exploitation is when a house help lives with their employers. That sometimes that comes in some form of exploitation that will lead to either too much of work or even sexual exploitation. So we encourage them to live on their own and also to be protected so that they can have their documentations on them by themselves and be able to escalate when there are issues of concern.
Let's talk about briefly the toll-free line you've just launched. How does that exactly operate?
Well, yes. So the toll-free line is 134, hosted by the Communications Unit and the Sierra Leone Police. It is connected to all mobile networks, and it is there to identify and report or rescue suspected cases of trafficking. So we have, one, we have the reporting, two, we have the referral, and three, we have the actions. So the reporting I've just mentioned, and the public is hereby encouraged to call 134 when they see a suspected case of trafficking. And it's therefore for the public, for survivors and victims. And we have the referral. So when the telecommunications unit receive the call, what they do is they communicate or they raise what we call freedom alert to the nearest police station. And the nearest police station is required to register the complaint, and then what we call now is action. Then action should be taken. That is to go to the crime scene, investigate the matter where necessary, and provide protective support to the victim of trafficking. So that is how it works. So now, since we have the 134 up and running, I would like to encourage the public to be more vigilant and make sure that they report cases of child trafficking. Yes, I would like to just add that because the baseline report of our program was launched on that day by the Minister of Social Welfare, I would just like to quickly go through the data. So for Kailon, for example, the rate of child trafficking is 45%. For Cornwall is 45%, and Kailon is 32%, and Kenema is 26%. So I would like the public to know that, and the report is currently available. So we'll continue to do stakeholder engagement to enhance an intervention model. Thank you so much.
Together, so we can put an end to it. And let us fight together, so we can put an end to it. Human trafficking in persons is a criminal offense under the